What's up YouTube, this is Red Devilosa from Red Devilosa Reviews. Happy Halloween everyone. I wasn't tricked into watching this film, and it sure wasn't a treat. Just shit. Really fucking shit. This video will be different compared to my other ones, as I usually prefer to keep my horror videos tame on the visual side for my audience that doesn't deal with those well. I will preface now that there will be occasional footage from the trailers to help illustrate some of the things I will talk about. And believe me, there were a lot of fucking trailers for this movie, to the point where you can almost stitch them together to get a general idea of it. The Exorcist Believer is considered to be the real true sequel to The Exorcist 1973. Not that fake shit like 2, actual shit, or 3. Pretty great. Better than the first one, even though I'm biased with 1 as my favorite, or the TV series. Haven't seen that. The point is, none of those matter. This is the really real one. The film is directed and written by David Gordon Green, who has resorted to mooching off horror franchises like he's done with the modern Halloween films. The Exorcist 1973 is, as I said, personally my favorite horror film, which I know might sound really weird to some. The film is celebrating its 50th anniversary, and it was able to rely on characters despite having a demon and possessed girl in it. William Friedkin, who recently passed away this year, was a bit of a nutcase on set, but he managed to make an all-time classic. I made a video on The Exorcist 1973 on my channel that you can check out after this video. I will give the new film this, that there are some decent ideas going on here. Victor and Angela are the father-daughter duo that we focus on. The two are the better parts of the film with their chemistry, so I guess that's something. We learned that Victor's pregnant wife was caught in an earthquake, and when she was found, she was in critical condition. The paramedics say that Victor can only save his wife or his unborn child. Given that Angela is a character I mentioned before, there's that. I also hate that this was in the trailers, as this legitimately is the most interesting bit regarding this already questionable plot. Victor has to make a choice between the lives of 2 girls in the beginning. Remember that for later. Well, you don't have to, because the trailers show this too, as in, there are 2 possessed girls in the story. L marketing. Victor loses faith in God after the death of his wife, which is fair. The girls, Angela and the forgettable friend Catherine, go into the woods and performs a seance to contact Angela's dead mother. They vanish, and a 3-day manhunt happens where they return traumatized, but seemingly alright outside of burn marks to their feet. Angela attacks her dad, then convulses, and Catherine has an outburst during a church service. Victor's nurse neighbor also happens to be a demon expert, too, because she was also apparently a prospective nun. How fucking lucky. And she suggests that Victor should look into Chris MacNeil's book, as she dealt with a daughter who needed an exorcism back in 1973. Which is where David believed this is where the pointing memes will occur. Let's not beat around the bush, because the marketing sure wasn't doing that. Ellen Burstyn returns in the film, someone who has refused to do any sequels after the first Exorcist. Frankly, with everything she's went through in that movie, and in real life acting in it, like in the scene where she gets tossed by Reagan into a wall.
I had a rig around my midriff with a wire coming out the back, and the stuntman was pulling me.
So we took her back the first time, and it was a good shot. And Billy said, we're going to do it again.
I said, Billy, he's pulling me too hard. I can get hurt. And Billy said, well, it has to look real. I said, I understand, but I'm telling you, I could get hurt. And the stuntman was standing there listening to this, and Billy said to him, okay, don't pull her so hard. But as I turned away, I felt them exchange a look. You see me hit, and you see me reach for my back. I screamed in horrendous pain. Billy motioned to Owen to tilt the camera down on me. And I saw it, and I was so furious, and said, turn the effing camera off, because I couldn't stand that he was willing to just get a quick shot of it before they called the ambulance, you know.
So I completely understood why she didn't want to return, despite it not really making sense anyway. Apparently, she did not want to return to this either, but she was offered a lot of money. She said no, and then the execs came back and said, well, what if we double the offer? And then the rest is history. God bless Ellen, and I'm glad she got paid for this fucking movie, but the second they reference her and actually use her, the film tanks immediately.
Immediately?
Immediately!
Everything prior to this moment could at least be given a fair shot. Really, the main issue was Catherine being a boring sack of shit. She's supposed to be the two-bit possessed posse with Angela, yet Angela gets more of the focus, hell priorities. Then the neighbor slash nurse slash nun lady just knows what's going on and sends Victor away to really a total stranger. And then the immediately SpongeBob joke works here too, as he just blindly goes away from his daughter to meet Chris. I just don't buy that as a man that was questioning all kinds of faith, yet this little coinky-dink happens, and he just accepts that at face value. It needed more time here. I also don't understand what value Chris could bring to the table. Yes, she dealt with a loved one that was exorcised, but she wasn't the one who actually did it. What would a 90-plus-year-old woman have here other than the fans of the original movie remembering her? Also, we learned that Reagan became distant from her mother because of the success of her memoir, which I don't believe Reagan would do that, but I guess I could give a bit of a pass. Judging someone who was 12 after 50 years isn't fair. But remember Reagan? I remember Reagan. I also remember Chris. Do you know what Chris doesn't remember? Her character in the first fucking movie. You've probably seen this clip floating around, but here it is.
I didn't actually witness it, the exorcism. They wouldn't let me.
Why not?
My opinion, it's because I'm not a member of the damn patriarchy.
Father Marin and Father Karras died to cure your fucking daughter. You were just a mom, an actress. You went through absolute shit that no one would want to witness, true, but not seeing the actual exorcism where two men died to save your daughter is where you draw the line. Father Karras chose to commit suicide so his demon-possessed self wouldn't harm Reagan or anyone else. Fucking insane. What else is insane is really just the utilization of Chris MacNeil for the rest of the movie. Victor brings Chris to see his daughter. Immediately, possessed Angela carves Reagan's name because fuck if I know. The way she carved it is not visible to Victor and Chris. More on that in a second. But Chris asked to see Catherine, who is still at her house, as her parents did not want her to go to a mental institution. Chris says that's a bad idea, so they should go there. Speaking of bad ideas, the 90-plus-year-old decides to see the possessed Catherine on her own while Victor's consoling Catherine's parents downstairs. Chris already told Victor that she isn't an exorcist, but a professional of knowing about exorcists. The nurse, neighbor, nun lady also told Victor this as well. Now she's in a room with possessed Catherine, and what does she do next? Well, she tries to cast out the demon.
What the fuck were you thinking?
Chris is not a moron, David. Why do you keep doing this? Of course, possessed Catherine pretends to be hurt, but isn't because evil, and then she takes a cross and stabs Chris in both eyes, blinding her and sending her to the hospital for the rest of the film. David mentioned in an interview that he wished William Friedkin got to see his movie before his passing to give his thoughts on the movie. This is the same William Friedkin who walked out of The Exorcist 2 after 5 minutes because he knew how hot garbage that movie would be.
I was at the Technicolor lab, and one of the color timers said, "Hey, we're running Exorcist 2. Do you want to go in the screening room and have a look at it?" And I was over there doing something else, and I said, "Okay, sure." So I went in the screening room, and I see some guys riding on the back of a bumblebee or some fucking thing. It was unreal. And I left. These Warner Brothers executives drove out to Pasadena in their big limousines, and they were all dressed up, and they went into the theater, which was packed, turn-away crowds, and they went and sat in the last row. The executives go into the last row. 10 minutes into the picture, a guy stood up in the audience. He stood up and he looked around, and he said, "The people who made this piece of shit are in this room." And somebody else said, Where are they? 10 or 12 people get up, and he says, "They're all back there."
Apparently this was one of the last things he mentioned before his passing, and yeah, take it with a grain of salt, but it kinda does sound like something Friedkin would say. Chris, who is blind for the rest of the film, has a long speech about how it doesn't matter what cultures or backgrounds we have, good is good, evil is evil. Victor needs to assemble the holy avengers of religion to cast out the demon from the possessed posse. Yes, it's corny. And where the fuck are the scares? There's a build-up here, yet everything is rushed as fuck, but also nothing is happening. The original Exorcist has Chris talk to Father Karras about an exorcism after she's exhausted her finances in trying to cure Regan to no avail. She didn't have faith in God or the devil, but it came to a point where she had to accept the reality as there was really no option left. Father Karras, a priest who was also struggling with his faith after the death of his mother, apologized and said that the exorcism can't be done unless they find definitive proof that Regan needs one. He does give the chance to see for himself that Regan speaks backwards, vomit bombs him, and her belly has the carving "Help Me" from the real Regan. The Exorcist 1 was able to use its time to develop the characters while also focusing on the general plot of the movie. Exorcist Believer has the time, but none of the substance or development. Characters make decisions on a whim. Bits and pieces of the general narrative of the first one are happening in the chasm of nothing. We get to the final exorcism scene with the possessed posse strapped to chairs. There is a father in this movie, but he can't perform the exorcism that was assigned to him to do, because apparently the diocese forbade him to do so. They think the possessed posse needs psychiatric help, even when they have shown all the evidence that the first movie did. Bullshit. Also, Victor says that they will do the exorcism without the father. How? He's the whole fucking point. You need him. But yeah, who needs the exorcist for The Exorcist? Father Maddox gives his book to neighbor nurse nun lady because reasons. The final exorcism has the possessed girls, Victor, the neighbor nurse nun lady, the local priest, the root work healer, and Catherine's parents. Catherine's parents were barely talked about, and this is why. It should be obvious by now, but they do jack shit in the movie. Victor tells them that Father Maddox will not be performing the exorcism, and Catherine's parents get into an argument, which granted is fair, but then the neighbor nurse nun lady starts the exorcism and everyone shuts up, making the argument null and useless. Victor still doesn't believe in everything going on despite everything that happened in this movie. But then possessed Angela reveals that the demon within her knows that Victor didn't actually want her. He chose her mother to live, but his wife died from the physical injuries, leaving Victor with Angela. This is where they say the one line in the movie that I actually liked. God played that trick on you. Now this is where the old bamboozle I talked about earlier in the scene. The demon says that they will need to decide which of the possessed posse will live and the other to die. Otherwise it will kill both of them.
One girl lives, one girl dies. You can choose.
Somehow there is no dialogue amongst the three parents. That old argument that had no relevance, this one actually needed to happen. We're talking about choosing one of your daughters to die while the other one survives. They just look in glares. Catherine's mom literally has all the leverage to use against Victor. He didn't even want Angela. Their daughter is Christian, and she always went to church, and they actually loved her. How is there nothing to talk about? While they continue to let nothing happen, that's when Father Maddox shows up. He comes in and says the "Oh Father, hallowed be thy name," and gets his neck snapped like an Exorcist movie normally does it. Worthless father compared to the base Chad that was Father Marin, played by the late Max von Sydow.
Do not despise my command because you know me to be a sinner. It's God himself who commands you.
Father Maddox literally could have kicked rocks and nothing would change. Victor tells the possessed Angela that he loves her and that his mother loved her, and they see that it starts to work. Again, Leslie Odom Jr. does try to give a shit in this film. Catherine is asking her mother what about her because her fucking doormat of a mother is useless and is not trying to save her life at all. While this is happening, Catherine's dad, not even looking into the room, yells that he chooses Catherine. The demon hears this and Angela flatlines. But wait, remember the bamboozle? Because demon? Yeah. So Catherine gets dragged to hell. The one picked to live is actually supposed to be the one that would die. I feel bad for Catherine, not because of the dragging to hell thing, but that she was really just there to lose from the get-go. It also becomes painfully obvious that this would happen as Victor and his family got some kind of development where Team Catherine is nada. Something I didn't mention in my Exorcist video is a small interaction after Regan is finally free from Pazuzu. She cries in the corner for her mother, but instead of Chris immediately going in for the hug, she looks concerned and hesitant. She went through so much pain and torture for so long. She was manipulated by the demon on multiple occasions until she finally gets to the point where it's too much and hugs her daughter. Small detail, but way more impactful. Accepting the demon is gone and immediately hugging the kid right after is trash compared to that. Anyway, the film wraps up. Angela goes back to school. Catherine is eternally suffering. And Chris is still in the hospital bed blind. But someone walks into the room. It's a woman. Oh my god, it's Reagan, all grown up. Look at them hugging. Oh, what a beautiful moment. This is what I've been waiting for the last 50 years. Fuck you, David. Linda Blair and Ellen Burstyn hugging does tug at the heartstrings, but none of this is earned. Clearly this was an attempt to make people leave the theater or their chair with some warm feeling at the end. Reagan just forgives her mother for the memoir, which was a reason to be upset about in the first place. Whatever. Movie over. My first note is that this movie had no reason to try to bring in the main Exorcist franchise at all. They could have done something better if they actually got to use the characters they had, but not make everyone one note or nothing. The premise of picking one or the other is a fine concept, but when a whole set of characters from one side has no development, you introduce a bias that anyone could expect who was going to live and who was going to die. If Team Catherine had anything like Team Angela did, have an actual argument between the three parents, or hell, Catherine's mother just talks to Catherine rather than Catherine needing to ask her, "What about me, mommy?" When Angela has all the reasonings for her to stay alive, Catherine gets nothing but concerned faces. The two girls did an excellent job playing possessed girls though. Props to Lydia Jewett and Olivia O'Neill. The resolution has nothing going for it either. The multiple religions fighting this possession ate a dick. If it was for points, then fine, that's cool. But they legitimately don't do anything. The new Halloween films got scrutinized for the community versus evil shit too. Stop being a one-trick pony, David. The religious parents just lose their daughter to hell because of a moment of weakness, and Victor regains his faith now that he believes their demons are real. Alright, great. Glad to know that Catherine gets to suffer in hell because of her dumbass parents, and Angela gets to go back to school despite her friend dying. There's also the thing that this film relies on the classic modern jump scares and score, which is lame as fuck. Something that helped the first movie is the remarkable use of silence. It was the silence that brought more tension to the scenes. Friedkin was able to rely on just the direction, lighting, and characters to build such tension without help from a soundtrack. Granted, I'm not saying that a good horror film has to do this method, but when you compare the two films, it's night and day. The way this movie ends just does not justify why two sequel films are in the works. Granted, The Exorcist never made sense to be a franchise to me in the first place, but pre-confirming that this new sequel is getting a trilogy long before the release of Believer was and is still silly. This film has a lot of moments that homages to the first film, even starting the film with dogs fighting to...
You know what she did? Your canting daughter?
So that criticism of not being supposed to compare the two is silly. Chris and Reagan not being in the movie would have made things a little bit better, but that's not really saying anything. Chris MacNeil just does not have the same weight as bringing back Laurie Strode did in the Halloween franchise, and that's okay. But it also doesn't help when the character herself is using lines to justify why she shouldn't be in this movie. She isn't a fucking exorcist. At least she got paid, so there's something. I just got that sinking feeling that if the franchise does continue, they'll rely on Linda Blair again. Also, don't do a drinking game every time this film says the word Reagan. I'm not responsible for how it would seem like half the script copied and pasted her name throughout the film. Anyways, I'm rambling at this point. I'm perfectly fine not watching this ever again. If you like reviews and opinions on movies, comics, TV shows, and video games, you can subscribe to this channel, Red Devilos Reviews, for more of that content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Peace.